Good morning, students. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. Good morning.
So, very first thing is I should congratulate all of you for your very good result of third semester. Congratulations to toppers as well as the whole class for successfully completing your third semester. And I wish all the best for all of you for your coming semesters also. I wish you will keep the same kind of success, or you will those who are not coming in the toppers list, they will also find some place in the toppers list. So I wish you all the best for coming semesters. Today I have scheduled a guest lecture. We will start that in 5 minutes. I'm just waiting for your class to join the class students. So before that, let me just tell you a few things. Already I have activated the quiz on Moodle. So please check that you all will complete the quiz in defined time. Also regarding your submission, till now I am not that much happy with the submission that you people are doing. So please try to complete the remaining assignments and submission, because as I told you, we have already completed most of the experiment from the practical list. So the list is also available on Moodle, and we have completed experiments which are there in the list. So the submission link is activated. As and when you finish it up, you try to submit all the things, assignments as well as practical. Only last practical is left, that we will complete in the coming weeks. That is for interfacing, and one more assignment on that. So otherwise, the rest of the work is already mentioned on the Moodle. So as and when you get time, you try to complete it. If you will complete it before deadline, then it will be very good thing. You need not wait for just to the deadline to come. To try to complete it within time. Any other thing regarding submission or any other queries, if you have, you can tell me. Otherwise, in next few minutes, we will start the session.
Ma'am,
Yes.
ma'am, in assignment, you are in second question, you are mentioned, suppose in second assignment, you are mentioned write instructions of arithmetic instructions only. Then that is only we have to write, or all instruction which is comes in program.
No, no. Wherever it is mentioned, only that instructions you write. Because already in the practicals now, we are writing all the instructions, Manish. So there you
Okay,
need
ma'am.
not repeat it. Like
Okay.
I have asked for the this instructions
Arithmetic.
only. Yeah.
Arithmetic. Then
Yes.
multiplication and division only, no, ma'am.
Yes. Multiplication
Thank.
and division only.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah, and then when the string instruction program is there, then that time you explain all the string instructions. The content on the slide that I have, I don't remember whether I shared. If not, I will check today and I will share it again. If not, Johan's question is assignment 3, supposed to write program for either smallest or largest. Yes, don't write both. You just mention what you are writing it. If you are writing it for smallest number, you clearly mention that in the question. If you are writing it for largest number, you mention that. Only one, because there is a difference of only one instruction, JC or JNC. So we need not repeat the whole things. Okay? Any one thing you write. Any other question, any other query? And you just check the Moodle quiz also, because that is going to help you for IIT 2 as well as in your term work. 5 marks we are going to consider from the quiz. Your whatever number of quiz are there, total 6 modules, so 6 quiz I will be keeping, and average of all the 6 quiz marks will be given you as a term work out of 5 marks. So please complete it. Marks for quiz, 10 attendance. So like that, your out of 25 term work will be there. So please complete everything in time. If anybody has not completed quiz because of any reason, I will reopen all the quizzes last before the submission time, and at least that time you try to complete it. So today your attendance is quite less. Any reason for that? I'm finding only 29 students in the class, or your first session left late. Prathamesh CR is there? No. One more, day after tomorrow we have holiday, and the same thing in the next week also there is one holiday. So we are missing some lectures for COA as well as one lab for microprocessor. So I may arrange some extra lecture, may schedule some extra lecture, because we have to finish our whole syllabus within this month only. Maybe we will be planning, we are planning actually to keep your IIT 2 in first week of May probably. And then second week onwards somewhere your Viva and the schedule will start. And then your theory examination timetable will be given by university. So maybe if required, I'm going to schedule one or two extra lectures. So let's see. Good afternoon, Kunal sir.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Yeah. So students, as I told you, today we have Mr. Kunal Meher. I will just introduce sir, and then we will start for today's session. We have Kunal sir, Mr. Kunal Meher. He is working as assistant professor in Department of Computer Engineering in our XI. He has completed his BE and ME in Computer Engineering from Mumbai University, and currently he is pursuing his PhD in Computer Engineering. He has 14 years of academic experience and 2 years of industrial experience. Kudal sir has conducted several seminars and workshops on network simulator, that is NS2, cybersecurity and ethical hacking, and Linux network programming. He has taught various subjects like microprocessor, advanced system security and digital forensic, cryptography and system security, open source technology, computer organization and architecture, object oriented programming methodology, etc. Today he is with us to share his knowledge on present and future state of microprocessor. So I welcome Kunal sir to our class and I request him to start his session. Kunal sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, madam, for your kind. Good afternoon, students. So let me present my screen.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. I hope my screen is visible.
Yes, sir. Just play slideshow, sir.
Yes,
Yeah.
I do it. So today I'm going to talk about the present and future of microprocessor. I have decided some topics on which I'm going to talk today. Will talk in brief regarding evaluation of microprocessors, then advance in microprocessor manufacturing, again in brief only, advance in processor architecture, then advance in processor implementations. Fine. So I'm going to start with the evaluation of microprocessors. Why the term microprocessor? Because earlier the processors were there, but that was of huge size. So it was using vacuum tubes. Vacuum tubes again are similar to transistor, but very large in size. So you cannot fit in a chip. And when the first very small size in transistor was invented, and that time microprocessor was started, right? Microprocessor evaluation was started. That was by Intel chip 4004. Even the transistors have gone through evaluation steps. First transistors, then there is a called as a discrete transistors. Then what is used today in the computers are called as a planar transistors. Let's not go into what is the difference between discrete and planar transistor. That is maybe not our area. But what is used today are the planar transistor. And the transistor size itself is decreasing from maybe if you check in 1971 4004 that microprocessor was developed by Intel, okay, and it uses a 10,000 nanometer process technology. It uses 10,000 nanometer process technology. Now what is process technology? That also I shall explain you. 10,000 nanometer here is called as a process technology. That is nothing the size of transistor. Size of transistor. If you check in Intel 4004, only 2,300 transistors were used. You should understand one thing: as you have more number in microprocessor, the faster the processor it will be, right? If you have more number of transistors, then the processor efficiency increases, the processor becomes faster. And to accumulate more number of transistors on one chip, microprocessor chip, you need to keep on decreasing the transistor size. So it was 10,000 nanometer in 1971. Today, you have 7 nm transistor, 7 nm process technology. So transistor size is decreased from 10,000 nm to 7 nm, right? So it is, I'm talking about in 2020, 20. Fine. So this is how the transistor size has decreased. That is what the Moore's law also says. If you know Moore's law, what it says, the efficiency of CPU will double every 10 years or 15 years or 20 years, whatever. Sorry, not 10 years. I'm sorry, very sorry. Efficiency of the processor will increase every year, or in some, there is a, means in some places, if you search every 18 months, it is said 1 year. So you can consider 1 year or 2 years, right? So what do you mean by efficiency of processor increases every 1 year by Moore's law? It is because the transistor size is decreasing right? The transistor size is decreasing every 1 year, right? So it is becoming half, you can say. So 10,000 nanometer is the size of the transistor, which was started in 1971. Then 8008 Intel microprocessor. I'm not talking about more about AMD processor or IBM processors. So there are a number of companies. Intel is one, IBM is another, then AMD is one. Number of companies who manufacture the processors, microprocessor. These are the Intel processor. Number of transistors are increased to 3098 transistors, right? In 1978, which you are studying in your syllabus, 8086 microprocessor. How many transistors it is saying? It is saying 29,000 transistors. What is this process technology they are using? 3000 nanometer. I hope you understood what is the meant by that nanometer. It is the size of transistors, but it is called as a process technology. If you are having any doubt, put it in the chat box, right? Or you can unmute yourself and ask me. So these are 16-bit means 8-bit, 16-bit microprocessor. 8086 is a 16-bit microprocessor. Then 80386 was the first. 80386 was the first 32-bit microprocessor. Again, the transistor size, total number of transistors in microprocessor is 275,000. The transistor size decreased to 1500 nanometer. Then in 1993, Pentium, 3.1 million transistors. What is the size of the transistor of process technology? Is 800 nanometer. In 1995, Pentium Pro, 5.5 million transistors. What is the process technology? 500 nanometer. 2006. See, I'm not showing me all the processor. There are a number of processors in between, right? 2006, Pentium Deep Pretzler, 362 million transistors. What is the processor technology used? Process technology used 65 nanometer. 2007, Core 2 Duo, 411 million transistor. What is the process technology? 45 nanometer. 2011, i7. We talk about i7. It is what is displayed here. See, there are a number of cores. 4-core i7 is there. Then dual-core i7 is there. 8-core i7 is there. So this is a 8-core i7 technology. 2.6 billion. Okay. So from million, it is moved to the billion now. Billion transistors. Process technology, 22 nanometer. 2016, 22-core Xeon. Then the number of transistors, 7.2 billion transistors, 14 nanometer. Right? So this is how the microprocessor evaluation is happen, from which uses the vacuum tubes. The time at which the processor uses the vacuum tubes, those were not microprocessor, those were processor. The time when they started to use the small size transistors, and small size transistors were invented, then the microprocessor was invented. Right? There are a number of processors I mentioned here. So it is from 1900 to 2025. Timeline is shown here. From electromechanical, solid state relay, vacuum tubes, then transistors, then integrated circuits. How the evaluation is going on, right? And what the speed we are achieving now. The speed we are trying to get is a human brain. Again, for that, achieve the human brain speed, instead of the traditional computing, we need to use some another computing that also we'll see. There are other terms. Instead of semiconductor computing, we will see other computing possibles that we'll see at the end. Right? So that is how the evaluation has happened. These are the generations, or you can say family name earlier. P1 family, 8086, 80186, P2 family, 80286, 386, 486. So there are some numbering of generations are there. Do not get confused, because Core i7 has the number of generation now. Intel Core processor has first generation, second generation, third generation. That is different, and this one is different. Okay, don't get confused with that one. So Pentium 4, then you have Itanium processor, then you have Core 2 Duo, dual core, right? And then Core i3, Intel Core i3, i5, i7, and now i9 or i9. These are regarding Intel processors. Similarly, equivalent to Intel processor, there are AMD processors in the market. Okay? AMD processors. This is about the evaluation of microprocessor. Next, let's move to the next point. I hope there is no question. If there is any question, you can always unmute yourself and ask me question, or otherwise I am waiting in the chat box. Advance in processor manufacturing. So how the processors are manufactured? CPU lithography process, that is the fabrication of the CPU. That is the optical lithography, is a photon-based technique comprised of projecting an image into photosensitive emulsion coated onto a substrate such as silicon wafer. So what is required before you start the fabrication is a silicon wafer. How you get the silicon? From sand. The first step is to gather sand. And from sand, you get the silicon. And then on the silicon wafer, you fabricate everything. There are a number of steps it will go through in the fabrication process. So the first step here, it is a prepare wafer, silicon wafer. Then grow oxide, then applied photoresist, then align mask, expose it to UV light, then each oxide and dope wafer. And after that, the transistors are planted on the wafer, right? There are a number of transistors, billions of transistors are coated on the wafer. And then the testing and everything else. So there are a number of steps. Some steps are not used by some companies. Some more steps are used by the other companies. So these are just in general steps. Those can vary depending upon the company and the processor. It is exposed to UV light. Instead of exposing to UV light, there are other options. It can be exposed to E-beam or it can be exposed to X-ray. Again, depending upon the company, it can use number of technology. So expose UV light is one option, but there is other option of exposing to E-beam, and another option is to X-ray. So that is also possible. So that is how the, in short, I am telling you, this is how the CPU fabrication happens. See, it is one of the most complex fabrication. CPU fabrication is one of the complex, right? So many transistors, billions of transistors on a very tiny chip you need to fit, right? So it is one of the complex fabrication process. So I'm talking about the process technology. That is also called as a technology node, process technology, or simply node. Okay, that are the terms used. So CPUs are made using billions of tiny transistorical gates that switch on and off to perform calculation. So transistors are nothing but electrical gates actually, which turn on and off to perform certain operation calculation. Okay, they take power to do this. The smaller the transistor, the less power is required. You understand it? If you keep the transistor bigger, then you require more power. So to consume less power, you require smaller transistor. Today, even 7 nm technology is there, 10 nm technology are the measurement of the size of this transistor, nm being the nanometers, right? So these are this process technology is a matrix used to judge how powerful a particular CPU is. How powerful a particular CPU is. If you check i9, Intel Core i9, I think it uses 10 nm technology. Yes, 10 nm technology, process technology. It becomes more and more powerful because you can fit so many transistors in a small chip. Since smaller transistors are more power efficient, they can do more calculations without getting too hot, which is usually the limiting factor for CPU performance. Right? It is also allows for smaller die size, right? You don't need to CPU size, you want smaller, right? So transistors are smaller, then you can have smaller die size, which reduce cost and can increase density at the same size. This means more cores per chip. So today you have 8 cores in one chip. So if you have smaller transistor size, you can have multiple cores on a single chip without increasing the chip size or die size. We call it as a die size, chip size or die size. So you can keep the die size same, have more number of cores on it with more number of transistors. That is what the benefit of the smaller process technology. I hope you understood this one. The next point here, advance in processor architecture. 8086 microprocessor has two-stage pipelining. You agree to it? Fetch and execute. It has 2 units in it, that is a BIU, bus interface unit, and execution unit. So it implements two-stage pipelining. It fetches it, keep it in a 6-byte queue, right? And then execution is done. So fetching and execution can be done simultaneously. This is instruction level pipelining. Instruction level pipelining. So pipelining is one of the issue that is there. One of the architecture feature which is there in every microprocessor. How many stages will have that pipelining that differ? Today we have 20 stages in a pipelining. 20, 14 stages, 16 stages, depending upon the processor, it varies. 8086 has 2-stage pipelining. If you say i7, it has 20-stage pipelining. Meaning of that 20-stage pipeline, what is meaning of that? At a time, processor can process on 20 instructions. At a time, processor can process on 20 instructions. If you consider this example, which is shown in the slide, it is 5-stage pipelining. What are those stages? Instruction fetch, instruction decode, execution, memory write, and then write back into register. That is what the last stage it is there. So there are 5 stages mentioned here. If you check, this is a timelining, T1, T2, T3. So these are the clock, T1, T2, T3, T4, T5. At T1 clock, only one instruction is processed by the processor. That is the first instruction. At T2 clock, 2 instructions are processed by the processor. One in decode stage, one is in fetch stage. At T3 clock, 3 instructions are processed by the processor. One in execution state, one in decode stage, one in fetch state. At T4 clock, 4 instructions are processed by the processor. One in memory write stage, one in execute stage, one in instruction decode stage, one in instruction fetch stage. In T5, 5 instructions are processed simultaneously by the processor. Write back, memory, execute, decode, instruction fetch. So at a time, processor is processing 5 instructions here. Are you getting this point? That is what the pipelining is. This is not parallelism, but it is a instruction level. You can call it as an instruction level parallelism, pipelining. For parallelism to achieve, you may require 2 threads or 2 cores or 2 pipes. This is considered a single pipe. It can execute 5 instructions, not execute, I will say. It can process 5 instructions simultaneously, right? So pipelining was feature, is a very important feature. Then branch prediction logic was introduced because of the number of stages in pipelining increases. Branch prediction logic, maybe you are not heard of this, right? Branch prediction logic is not required for 8086 microprocessor because it is 2-stage pipelining. And see, what is a branch prediction logic? What is branch? Normally, the instructions are executed sequentially. So first instruction, then the next consecutive instruction, then the third consecutive instruction. I think you are done C programming, right? In the program, suppose there is a go-to instruction. Go-to instruction is there. It is branch instruction. What happens when the go-to instruction is there in the program? instead of executing the next instruction, it jumps to some another instruction. Yes or no? It jumps to some another instruction. So whatever instructions are fetched here already, those won't be executed. Yes or no? Because these instructions are fetched sequentially. So those instruction, if this is a go-to instruction, the next instruction executed won't be the next consecutive instruction, but it will be some another instruction. So that is branch. So in Pentium processor, it has a 5-stage integer pipelining, right? So in that case, the branch prediction logic was introduced because there was a flushing problem. If there is a branch instruction which is fetched, which is fetched by the processor, it may jump to some another location. And then whatever instructions are fetched sequentially need to be flushed. Whatever instructions are fetched sequentially in the pipelining need to be flushed. So to reduce the flushing problem, to reduce the pipelining flushing problem, branch prediction logic was introduced, right? And it is there in all the processors now, right? It was started in Pentium processor, and then it remains there. Maybe you are not able to understand it right now. I'm not able to go in deep also, right? But this is just an overview. This is one of the features there in processors. Okay, just you need to remember what is the use of branch prediction logic. It avoids the pipelining flushing problem, which is because of branch instruction in the program. That's it. You need to remember for now. Cache. Nowadays, every new processor has the cache, right? It started in Pentium. 80386 was not having any cache. Pentium processor has the cache, 8 KB cache, instruction cache, 8 KB data cache. So for instruction and data, it has the different cache. The cache size, if you check, is also increasing from the Pentium to Pentium 4 to i7 processor. If you check number of processor, the cache size is also increasing. So i7 processor, if I take, it has the L2 and L3 cache. L1 cache is inside processor. L3 cache is outside processor. Okay. L1, L2 here, both are actually inside processor in this case, and L3 is outside processor. So L1 in i7 processor is 32 KB, L2 is a 256 KB, and L3 is a 8 MB. So cache size is also increasing. L1 and L2 are per core actually. If i7 is a dual core or a quad core processor, for every core there will be 32 KB L1 cache, 256 KB L2 cache, and L3 will be shared by all the cores, right? So depending upon core also there is so it is not per processor, but it is per core L1 and L2, right? So that is a cache size. Again, what is the need of cache size? You will study in COA cache. What is the need of cache, and what are the types of cache that you will study? The next is a superscalar architecture. Now here again, this is a feature which is required to increase number of instructions executed at that time, right? So here, if you check in the diagram, at T5 time, 10 instructions are executed. 10 instructions are executed. Not executed, I will use the word process. 10 instructions are processed by the microprocessor, right? Why this is possible? Because now in superscalar architecture, you can have 2 pipes or 3 pipes, 4 pipes. This is the example of 2 pipes. You can have 2 pipes which can do the execution simultaneously, right? Or you can term it as a 2-core, dual core processor, right? So if you have 2 cores are, you can say it is a 2 CPUs. So 2 cores can fetch instructions simultaneously. So that's why one core is fetching here and another core 2 is fetching here. Second core is fetching here, right? So first core can execute simultaneously, second core can execute. So simultaneously 2 cores can be executing the program or instructions. And in that case, if you apply the integer pipelining also along with that, then you can say here in T1 stage, 2 instructions are fetched. In T2, not T1 time, 2 instructions are being fetched. At T2 time, 2 instructions, the new 2 instructions are fetched, and to the previous 2 instructions are in decode stage. And similarly, it will continue. So at T5 stage, if you check, 2 instructions are in write back stage, 2 instructions in memory write stage, 2 instructions in execute, 2 in decode, and 2 in fetch. This is possible because of superscalar architecture. Superscalar is nothing but process. Pentium has, we say, 2 pipes are is there. Pentium processor has 2 pipes. I hope you understand by Pentium, right? Don't get confused with the Intel. Intel is a company name and Pentium is a processor name. So Pentium is what after 80486 the Pentium processor was started. Then we have Pentium 2, Pentium 3, Pentium 4, and then Itanium, then Core i3, i4, Core 2 Duo in between, right? So that is a superscalar architecture. You can have dual core, so you have 2 cores. 2 cores can execute 2 instructions simultaneously. So now this is parallelism, right? Because you can see 2 instructions are simultaneously fetched. So you can call this as a parallelism. Out of order execution is one of the feature which is added after Pentium 4 NetBurst technology, NetBurst architecture. Pentium 4 के बाद ये add हुआ है, out of order. Because in order, so if you check the first diagram here, the instructions are executed stage wise. But what if the first instruction, see here, each instruction clock to decode, 1 clock to execute, but to writing into the memory, it is taking 4 clock cycles. For writing into the memory, taking 4 clock cycles, and for write back, it is taking 1 clock cycle only. So if for writing into memory, it is taking 4 clock cycle, what the other instruction will do by the time? By the time, that is called as a stall period. For the other instruction, this is S stands for stall period. They cannot do anything. So that is a waste of time for the other instruction. Waste of time for the other instruction. So there was one feature added, that is out of order execution, where the execution can be done out of order. So that is what done here. See, the first instruction is not executed, means execution is not finished, but the second instruction execution is finished out of order, right? So that is out of order execution technology which was developed, NetBurst technology, NetBurst architecture, I think. Yep. What is hyperthreading? Another feature which is you can see, I don't remember in which processor it is there, but in number of processors this is there. Hyperthreading technology is a hardware innovation that allows more than one thread to run on each core. So if you don't have you have single core processor only, microprocessor only. But if it is a hyperthreading processor, it is similar to dual core. Because you can run 2 threads on a single core. So more threads means more work can be done in parallel. So if you consider dual core processor using hyperthreading technology, which uses the hyperthreading technology, it is you can say similar efficient as quad core processor. Core processor with hyperthreading technology is equivalent to the quad core processor, because each processor can run 2 threads. So if there are 2 cores, one core can run 2 threads and another core can run 2 threads. So there can be 4 threads running in. So 4 instructions can be fetched simultaneously. Meaning of that, yes or no? And it is equivalent to quad core processor. But yes, if you efficient wise, it will be less efficient by the quad core, but it is means similar to quad core processor because there are 4 threads running in the dual core processor. Right? So hyper-threading, I hope you understand what is this technology. More than one thread you can run in each core. That is hyper-threading. Turbo boost technology. Maybe you have heard this term. What is turbo boost? Intel turbo boost technology is one of the features built into latest generation Intel microarchitecture. It automatically allows processor cores to run faster than the base operating frequency. Right? Now, what is the base operating frequency of 8086 microprocessor? Anyone knows? Can you write down the answer in the chat box? What is the base operating frequency of 8086 microprocessor? Operating frequency of 8086 microprocessor. At least one student know the answer. You have studied 8086, right? Or you are not hearing, listening to me at all. There are 3 frequencies. No one. 5 megahertz, 8 megahertz, 10 megahertz. And today we are using processor with the gigahertz of the operating frequency. And what this turbo boost technology does, it allows the cores to speed up itself. So if your processor is running at 3 gigahertz, you can it automatically run faster to 3.2 gigahertz. Okay. So if it is operating below power, current, and temperature specification limits, this here the speed increase is done by this processor itself. That is one thing you should understand. It is done automatically by the processor itself. Fine. So it can speed up from 3 but not 3.3 gigahertz से 8 gigahertz पे नहीं जाएगा. But there is some limit also, right? There is certain limit. But that is what the turbo boost technology is there. The next one is overclocking. If you check, some processor are unclocked. Unclock, nothing but you can overclock it. Okay. So some processors are unclocked. Now, what is that unclock means? Overclocking your unclocked Intel Core processor, RAM, motherboard is a way to custom tune your PC. Right? You can overclock. Overclock processor also, actually overclocking of RAM is also possible. Overclocking of motherboard is also possible. You can adjust the power, voltage, core, memory setting, and other key system values for more performance. But what is the difference between hyper-threading, turbo boost technology, where the speed increase is done by the processor itself? Here, you need to do manual speed increase. So some processor is working on 3 gigahertz. Manually, you can increase the speed. You can overclock it to 3.5 gigahertz. Right? So that is unclocked processor. That is manual speed increase. So again, some processor supports overclocking. Then these are the Intel Core i3, i5, and i7 generations. Right? So these are the generations of i3 processor, or you can i5 or i7 processor there. So first generation, and this is a code name given here for all the generations: Bloomfield, Linfield, Westmere, and these are the code names. First generation, these are the i7. These are actually official generation here: first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. So if you check how to find whether what is the processor you are using on your machine, you should be able to check it. What is the generation of the processor you are using? That should also If you check this chip name, Core i7-6700K. This it is Core i7 processor, but what is the generation? how you will come to know? This is the first digit here, 6. It tells that it is a 6th generation processor. This 5 tells that it is a 5th generation processor. 4 tells that it is a 4th generation processor. This K here tells that it is a unclocked processor. You can overclock it. So these symbols also have certain meanings. KC, X is there. X stands for extreme. So there are some symbols that also we'll see, right? And the process technology, 14 nanometer, that is a transistor size actually. 14 nanometer is used by the Core i7, fine? And then graphics card is there, not there, depending upon that, there is a. This is 6th generation, right? That is the Skylake. Skylake is a 6th generation Core i7. Similarly, 6th generation i3 and i5 processor is also there, right? These are 7th generation Intel processor. The code name is KB Lake. 8th generation Intel processor. 9th generation. By the development or 9th generation Intel processor, Intel introduced Core i9 processor. Right? So Core i9 processor uses Coffee Lake micro architecture. Coffee Lake is a code name, Coffee Lake micro architecture. Then 10th generation Intel processor are going to use 10 nanometer technology. So we are talking about 14 nanometer. 10th generation Intel processor are going to use 10 nanometer technology. Then 11th generation Intel micro. So the generations of this Intel processor i3, i5, i6, i3, i5, i7, and i9. i9 was introduced by 9th generation of Intel processor. Remember, that is Coffee Lake. So this is how the processors architectures, what features are added, that is explained here. Pipelining, branch prediction logic, cache was introduced, superscalar architecture, out of order execution, hyper-threading, turbo boost technology, overclocking, and this is an example of the processors. Right? And these are what the meaning of this last alphabet, which is displayed after that. K, C, those are mentioned in the slide. Intel and AMD both uses certain types of this symbols. K stands for unclock. You can overclock. X stands for extreme. P stands for GPU deactivated. Right? A stands for low power. T stands for M stands for mobile. So these are the some notations. How to check it? Suppose you want to check your processors. 5 megahertz. Nilesh Shah. Aman, you don't know. Yeah. So there are 3 frequencies on which the 8086 was: 5 megahertz, 8 megahertz, and 10 megahertz. Right? And today we are using the processor with gigahertz processor. So if you want to check what is the processor you are using, you can right click on the computer and go to the properties. This is Windows 7 I am using. Maybe in Windows 10 somewhat different. And here you can see processor Intel Core i3. These first 3 indicates it is a 3rd generation i3 processor, right? This M indicates it is for mobile device. It is for mobile device. My laptop is mobile device. Agree? Mobile means not mobile phone. My laptop is mobile device. I can carry it from one place to another place. So it runs on battery. Meaning of this, it runs. So desktop is not mobile device. It do not run on battery, right? So for desktop, you won't have M because it is not mobile. So for desktop, normally because here you don't need to consider the power consumption or energy consumption, right? But when you run on the laptop, that factor into consider, that is power consumption, because you are running on a battery. CPU 2.4 gigahertz. This is a operating frequency. That is what we term, right? For 8086, it is 5 megahertz. For my processor, it is 2.4 gigahertz. That is what the operating frequency here. Fine. So this is how we can check it on your machine. What is the processor you are using? Okay. So this is all about, I think, architecture, advanced in processor architecture. what are the different features added in the processors. Now we'll see the advance in, that is the last part, advance in processor implementations. So traditional computer that we are using today are based on semiconductors, transistors, semiconductors. So that is called as a semiconductor computing, conventional computing. But now the research is going on optical computing, DNA computing, or quantum computing, right? Now this processor will be entirely different than what is developed by Intel or IBM or AMD, means what is being developed now. It will be different, right? So the manufacturing process and everything will be different. So whatever I have explained is for the semiconductor computing, that is conventional computers. Optical computing, optical or photonic computing, photons produced by lasers or diodes for computation. Okay, what it uses? Photons for computation. So that is optical computing. Research is going on, and once the very strong optical computing is the market, its speed is very faster than these conventional computers that we are using today. Okay, so this is where one of the research area, number of companies are being working to develop the very strong optical computer. Fine, so that is one area. Then for decades, photons have promised to allow a higher bandwidth than the electrons used in conventional computers. So remember, electrons are used in today's conventional computers, and photons are expected to be used in optical, and then it is going to speed up the entire process. Another computing, which is again in research, that is molecular computing. Molecular computing is a branch of computing that uses DNA, biochemistry, and molecular biology hardware instead of traditional silicon-based computer technology. Right? So our is a silicon-based computer technology which uses the transistor on it, and then electrons, and then the calculations are done. This will be based on DNA. Again, the research is going on for making a computer. Again, if this is in reality, see, maybe this will take 10 years, right? So after maybe 10, 15 years, you will see a change in computing, change in computers use. Instead of the today's conventional computers, you will see optical computer or DNA computer, right? So that is very possible. What's going on is on quantum computing. So what is quantum? A quantum computer is a machine that performs calculation based on the laws of quantum mechanics, which is the behavior of particles at the subatomic level. Understanding quantum computer is confusing, or you can say difficult. I will try to explain you somewhat what is a quantum computer and what happens in that. So again, research is going on so Google, IBM, Microsoft, these companies are working to develop very large bits, qubits. We call it as a qubits here. I will tell you what is qubits. Qubits quantum computer. So already 72 qubits quantum computer is developed by Google. It is already they have already developed, and their testing is going on. What is expected, it is not expected within 2 years that quantum computer will come. It will take maybe 10 years, 10, 15 years to strong quantum computers to be reality, right? Strong means I'm saying now 72 qubits quantum computer is there. Strong means 10,000 qubit or 50,000 qubit quantum computer, which can perform the operations very fast than the conventional computers, right? The operations will be performed fast than the conventional computers. So this was the father of the quantum physics, and what he has written: when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Okay, that is what he is saying. So he has looked at this thing differently. Who is the father of quantum physics, and he has then the work is going on. Bill Gates, as he is quoted here, it is difficult to understand quantum physics, means quantum computers, how they works, how actually they are going to be working. Quantum computing is at very first time it is very difficult to understand. Okay, so I shall understand what is the I shall tell you one thing. Conventional computer works on bits 1 and 0. Yes or no? It works on bits. So either it will be true or it will be false. It will be true or false. Either it will be 1 or it will be 0. Quantum computers work on qubits. That is called as a quantum bits. Quantum computers works on quantum bits, qubits. And apart from these two states, true and false, there can be number of other superposition states, right? So true or false, apart from that, there can be number of other states possible. That is in the quantum computers. So what is wave particle duality? Wave particle duality is the concept that every elementary particle or quantic entity may be partly described in terms not only of particles but also waves. What is superposition? It says an object can be in two places at once while not being observed. So you can see in the picture a girl, right, who is not looking at the apples, who is not observing those apples. That one apple, there is only one apple which is at two places. So that is what written there. While you are not looking, an object can be in more than one state at once. So apple is there on the floor, ground, as well as apple is there on books. But actually there is only one object. So if you are not observing that object can be in two states. That object can be in two states. But once you observe it, observe means once you measure it, then the superposition states is lost. So what is this called as a superposition state? So true as well as false. The state between true and false. It is on the floor as well as it is on the book. This is a superposition state. But it is because you are not measure it. Once you measure it, it lost that superposition state, and then it is comes to the one of the state. So however, once the measurement of a particle is made, for example, its energy or position is known, the superposition is lost, and now we have a particular particle in a one known state. So once the in the next picture you can see here that girl is now observing the that object, and it is on the one state. It is on the top of the book. That's it. So once it is measured, it lost its superposition state. So again, this is one example. This lamp is on. You are saying this lamp is off, but superposition state can be both states, on and off. So it is not shown here on and off. On and off. So this is a superposition state. If you are not observing it, it can be on and off, both state. Once you observe it, will take one of the state. One more example, quantum entanglement. This is another term. It says two objects are related to each other in a way that one state cannot be described independent of another. So there are two objects here. Here it is now taking superposition state. So green as well as red. Here the another object. So there are two objects in superposition state. Here the second object is taking red and green. Once you observe it, once you measure it, it will lose the superposition state and it will come to one of the state. So here the state is green, and the other object also changes the state to red. So the behavior of these two objects are dependent to each other. dependent to each other. That is called as a quantum entanglement. It says two objects are related to each other in a way that one state cannot be described independent of another. Right? I know it is difficult to understand for you right now. Again, this is a superposition, one of the example. Once you observe, measure it, it will take one of the state. Otherwise, if you do not observe it, it will there will be number of states. Switching between the state on number of states it will be. Right? So that is what the quantum weirdness we call. Superposition is essentially the ability of a quantum system to be in multiple states at the same time. That is something that can be here and there, up and down simultaneously. For us, it will be a qubit that is 0 and 1 at once. What is entanglement is an extremely strong correlation that exists between quantum particles. So strong, in fact, that the two or more quantum particles can be inextricably linked in perfect unison, even if separated by great distance. Okay, so even if the two objects are very far away, they are dependent to each other. That is entanglement. The particles remain perfectly correlated even if separated by great distance, which Einstein called as a Skupke action at a distance. Okay, fine. So this was our quantum weirdness. So classical bits, which the conventional computer works, that is 0 and 1. But qubits can take 0 and 1, and there can be number of other values possible that are mentioned by this calculation. Those are mentioned by this calculation. So today, if as I told you, 72-bit qubit quantum computer is already developed by Google, and the work is going on. So that is what we said by the Richard. I think I can safely say that nobody understands quantum mechanics. But you need to just accept it. Once it is a reality, maybe after 10 years, you need to accept it as it is. IBM has developed 20 qubits. I don't know which, maybe this was long back. Maybe IBM has already developed some more qubits computers. So IBM is working on quantum computers. Intel's 49 qubit processor, Intel is also working on the quantum computers. He has developed 49 qubit, Intel's has developed 49 qubit processor. Google, 72 qubit quantum computer. So work is going on to develop the quantum computers. Thank you. Now I shall keep it open for any questions from your side if you are having. If you do not understand anything, please ask. I can repeat it for you.
Yes, students, if anybody has any doubt to ask, you either unmute yourself and ask, or you can type in the chat box also. Kunal sir, there is one question. What are the factors we should look for in a processor while buying?
The factors depends upon what is the purpose. Whether you want to play, means you want is for a high graphics game. You want to play high graphics game. So if you want to play means gaming and Photoshop, suppose you are the applications like Photoshop you are using, right? So you can go for the i7 processor. So today I'm just talking with i3, i5 or i7. I'm not sure whether you will go for AMD processor because I am not having that much idea about AMD processors. So equivalent AMD processor also there. For i7, there is an equivalent AMD processor which gives the equivalence performance at the i7, right? So I'm not very sure about what are the names of the AMD processors, but depending, so i3, i5, and i7 for the normal uses, if you are not going for very high requirement memory requirement applications, right? You can go for i3 for normal users. But for your users, maybe now you are in third year, second year, right? Next year, maybe you need to use virtual machines by using VirtualBox, something like that. So at least you should have i5 processor. That is what I think, right? i5 processor is good enough for your study purpose and with a good amount of RAM, right? Maybe 8 GB you should go for, at least 8 GB you should go for, because in the next semester, suppose it will be online next semester also, considering that you will be doing practicals from home only. Maybe you are doing, you need to run Kali or Ubuntu from the virtual machine. So you required at least i5 with 8 GB of RAM. i7 is again very good. If you your budget is that much, then you can go for i7 also, i7 processor with 8 GB of RAM or 16 GB of RAM, that way. And then it comes with the some processor comes with inbuilt graphics card. You don't need to buy a graphics card, separate graphics card, right? So if you are going for gaming also, then i7 processor, which comes a graphics card. Some it depends upon generation also, right? You need to check all the generation, which generation has the graphics card. I have one slide which I have displayed already here. Some have the graphics card, right? And then which will be required for Photoshop, and then right. So this if you check this first generation, it don't have the it has the HD card, but others I don't have here. So most of them have graphics card. You need to check which one you want to go. So I find for my, I think it's a good enough. So the factors, I hope you understood what you should think, what you are going to do on the laptop or the desktop machine, which applications you are going to run. Depending upon that, you should buy. Only for Word and then normal processing, you should not buy i7. No use, not required. Okay, thank you. Anything else?
Any other questions, students? Okay, fine. I think there are no more questions from student. So Kunal sir, thank you very much for giving your time and sharing your knowledge with us. In our syllabus, we just have 8086, and that also not in detail. But with your today's session, at least our students could understand what are the various generations of microprocessors and what will be the future state of this. Like if somebody is really interested to get more knowledge on this, they can definitely search for quantum computing as well as the superscalar architectures and
Bye bye.
students, I am going to share a link for today's attendance as well as feedback. So please share your feedback on today's session, and if any kind of suggestions are there, you please mention into that. The link is shared in the chat box. So your attendance com feedback link is there. Okay. See, in today's session, what sir has shared, so most of the things, the pipelining concept as well as the cache memory concept, so that are already there in our syllabus. From a COA point of view, definitely in the coming lecture, we are going to study that. So what is the use of cache memory, and then what are the design factors consider while keeping the cache memories for different processors, because as sir said, there is L1, L2 and L3 cache. So what is the meaning of this? So what is split cache? What are the levels of cache? That is some introductory part of cache memory is definitely there in your syllabus. So when we will start our memory organization chapter. That time you will clearly understand that concept. Second thing regarding the pipelining. So we have pipelining, 6-stage pipeline structure for any microprocessor we are going to study. And the stalls, and then what are the different hazards for using pipelining, that everything is there again in your syllabus. So in the coming computer processor organization and architecture chapter, we are going to study all these things. So definitely from next session, the concepts that sir right now explain in terms of advanced microprocessors, we are going to study from COA point of view, because this computer organization and architecture subjects gives you outline for all these things. Why this subject is there in your syllabuses, you should at least know what are the basic things inside of your any personal computer or any desktop machine, and how exactly what are the design factors considered while the evolution of all these things took place, like memories or RAMs or ROMs, and all these things are there. So in our coming lectures, we are going to understand, or we are going to study all these concepts. And definitely, as I said, the next two modules, the processor organization architecture as well as this memory organization, is again the important part of your COA syllabus, which will maybe taking three lectures at least to complete the syllabus. 3 sessions will be required for that. So that's why I said maybe if required, I will be arranging extra session on your holidays. So I'll discuss with your CR, and definitely I will intimate you regarding the extra sessions. That's all for today, for today's session. So today we will stop here, and tomorrow and day after tomorrow, I guess the notice will come regarding holiday. If not, we will keep our all the sessions regularly, whatever is going on. So I'll intimate regarding this on your group, as well as with CR I will be discussing. That's all for today. Kindly mark your attendance and share your feedback with us. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I am still here. If anybody has any doubt or anything to discuss, you can stay back and ask.